Hey there everybody, this is Z-Wink from Z-Wink University, and I wanted to take some time out to talk about my experience with the Pinterest public program over the last 2 weeks and all the fun I've had with it. I'm hugely blessed to have done as well as I have in the last couple of weeks. I think I've earned something like 6 figures with them, and so I want to go over my testing methodology and sort of how it all unfolded from day one to where we are today. I'm sort of wrapping up on the program, ready to move on to something different, because if I work on one program for too long, I start kind of going insane. I like to mix it up. So I'm probably going to be moving on from Pinterest, which is why I feel comfortable showing all this to y'all now. There's still plenty out there to find. I only looked for broken access control issues primarily. And anyway, I'm just ready to move on to something different. But Pinterest has been a wildly great program. You got, as you can see here on the screen, 1 day validation time, and I can validate, no pun intended, that that's true. They do respond very quickly and pay very quickly, and they're among the top performers of any program I've ever worked with on Bug Crowd. So kudos to Pinterest and their triage team for very quickly responding and helping somebody like myself that has a short attention span stay engaged. So, as you can see here, I've submitted 39 findings to the Pinterest program since I started, working on this part-time about 2 weeks ago or so. And I found several P1s with them, which was glorious because, that's the largest single-paying P1 I've gotten on Bug Crowd. Those are really big dollar signs, right? That's great. A lot of P2s, P3s, and P4s. And, the reason I started working on this program was because I made a video for you folks talking about how I approach a target. And in making that video, I realized that this target really sort of caters to my skill set, and that I love broken access control, and they use IDs for absolutely every object. So, you have an advertiser ID or a customer ID or a business ID or a client ID, or that, everything's a number. So it makes it really fun and easy to test for broken access control, and that's sort of my passion. So I fell in love with the program really quickly, or at least in testing it, right? Very simple sort of scope here. So when I first started looking at it, I realized they noted api.pinterest.com sort of by itself, and then anything star.pinterest.com web apps. Now I know a lot of people have indicated Pinterest has a lot more primary parent domains than just these, and that's absolutely true, but they're not explicitly in scope, right? So we usually start with the things that are in scope, and if you develop a relationship with the program and feel like it might be okay to log things that are sort of tertiary to the main scope, that's on you to try to do that. But initially what I did was I just scoped Burp Suite to these 2 domains. So let's hop into sort of, I'm going to try to consolidate, a couple weeks worth of work here into a 30-minute to an hour-long video. I don't know how long this is going to end up, but I want to go through sort of how it all unfolded. And I've got on another screen over here all of my findings that I can't show you, right? But what I'm going to try to do is talk through at a high level, sort of from the bottom up, how I logged these and how I got started. Because I started with a bunch of P5s that were marked not applicable by Pinterest and worked my way up to sort of figure out what it was they cared about, right? Into bugs that were triaged. So let's work through this, okay? So we're starting on a new target. The first thing I always do, right, is we go scope Burp Suite for those resources. So let's delete everything out of here because I haven't actually scoped it yet. I want to keep it clean. I just cranked up Burp Suite. This is just a fresh copy of Burp. And I come over here, and y'all have seen me do this, right? I'm going to do a /.pinterest/.com. And that's going to pick up everything at Pinterest.com, including API. So that's really all we need to do to start sort of just, engaging just the traffic we want. Now over here, hiding map times, I like to start by showing all. That way you're not missing anything, and we can always tier it back from there, right? We don't want to show that, however, that was picked up before. Apparently we did the scoping. And now what we're going to do is just load up old Firefox, okay? So I normally like to work in 3 monitors. Now I was working in 2, but on one monitor I like to keep Burp. On another monitor I like to keep the web browser, and on a third monitor I like to keep Notepad++ open for taking notes. And I'm going to try to make a clean tab over there real quick in case I need to drag that over too. All right, so you're on the target. You don't know what's what. The first thing I always say, and I've posted Twitter notes on this, click all the buttons, right? Everything they want you to see on the website, the first thing you've got to go through and do is click all the buttons and use all the features. So we don't have an account yet. I always start by creating 2 accounts. So you would go to sign up right here. I think a lot of people, just for whatever reason, don't even bother to create accounts sometimes, or they only will use their Bug Crowd addresses. But remember, this is a public program. Anybody from anywhere can sign up for this with any email address, password, and random age you choose to type into the box, right? So for me, you know, I might type in my bug crowd address, or I might type in just some other, you know, toy domain I've got. Like, I think they might have actually blacklisted my special domain here, but let's try z+1 at z-w.ink, and we're going to give it a generic crappy password, and I'm going to tell it I'm 81 years old, right, and just hit continue, and it does seem to be liking that. Great. Okay, so I bought the domain z-w.ink. I just use it for testing and for fun stuff, right? Nothing important there. And anytime you own an email address at a domain, you can generally put a plus sign and then anything after it and alias it. So I can use the letter Z, which is an actual mailbox, and then I can alias it with +2, +3, +test, plus today's date, whatever I want to, which allows me to make a lot of really, you know, easy test accounts really quickly. So I'm going to go ahead and hit, you know, next now. So I have made a new account, and, you know, it asks you some subset of questions. You just answer next, whatever, click buttons, and, done. And eventually we get into the application. Okay. So then I would repeat the process for another account. And the idea here, and one thing I love about testing in Firefox, as you can see right now, I'm in one incognito window. I can open another browser session here. Let's see if we can just do just a regular new window now. So the first one's a private window. This is a new window, just a regular window. We're going to go to Pinterest.com. And so now what I've got is I've got a private browsing session. Is it going to let me do that? Yeah, I'm actually logged into another account still. So let me log out of this. It's one of my other testing accounts. So what I can do is have two completely different users in the same browser in two different browsing sessions. So I've got a private and a non-private, and it keeps the cookies separate. I just love that about Firefox. You can probably do it at anything. We're going to now create a different account, and we're going to do z+2 at z-w.ink. All right, so we're making two different accounts now. The first one was age 81. You usually want to make the data different on the second account in all ways you can. So this will be a 31-year-old instead of an 81-year-old. We'll go ahead and hit continue. And so now I've got two test accounts created, which will have two completely different sets of IDs, two completely different sets of login credentials. And now I've got two accounts that I can test against safely if I find insecure direct object references or broken access control issues that are put, post, delete, patch, whatever related. You know, I don't have to worry about borking somebody else's actual pins or boards or anything else, okay? I feel like I'm a little expert on Pinterest now after 2 weeks. I can talk the terminology. What are your ad grid board stats and things? So now we've got two accounts, right? So now I can come back over here to this other one, and where to go? I might have too many tabs open right now. I'm going to lose my brain. I normally have two monitors. There's three monitors. It's going to be hard. So you can see I'm in Z+1 on this one. I'm in Z+2 on the other one. Whatever. Doesn't matter. I just wanted to show you. I go through that exercise for every program that I work on. So now we're in Z+1. This was the first account we made. The first thing I do is I generally check for the most important types of bugs you're going to find. And you usually find those in the authenticated areas, right? So we're in the settings section here on Pinterest, and I would go through and immediately start changing a value on every one of these boxes right now. Injection, that some of you are cross-site scripting maniacs, and the first thing you're going to do is get on one of these and start trying to inject script into it, okay? I'm going to assume that's been done before. I didn't go into Pinterest looking for cross-site scripting vulnerabilities. I assume they have static and dynamic scanning tools and all that stuff, and finding XSS is probably unlikely to be very easy. It's probably going to be pretty difficult. So I'm just going to add another letter here. My last name is going to be 1. I'm going to say hi, account 1. You know, I like to add things that are related to the individual accounts, so when you get IDORs, it's easy to tell which account you're actually accessing, right? I might add a profile photo, and test the photo upload capabilities right here to make sure that it is in fact, and I did do that, to make sure that it is in fact only accepting, PNG or JPEG or whatever, because file upload dialogues tend to be a great way to get remote code execution or stored cross-site scripting if not validated properly. So I did go through the exercise of testing this photo upload dialogue. If y'all want me to make a video on how to test those, let me know, and I can make a video exclusively on testing upload dialogues, because there's actually a lot to that, and there's some extensions that do help and automate it. But never rely on automation, always do it by hand as well. So I'm going to save this. And what I also like to do is when I'm operating, and you notice I haven't even loaded Burp Suite yet, right? It's recording all this in the background, but we don't care. You don't just go look at it this second. What you can do if you want to see the traffic, just open the network developer console, right? And you can see what's going on, and you get an idea of the domains we're operating at. And so as you're changing things, I'm going to change myself to female here just to see what happens. Every one of these operations on this endpoint are occurring on www. Like we're not actually hitting the API side or anything here yet, right? Everything's still on www no matter what I'm doing. I'm going to remove that. Still haven't seen an API. And so what I ended up discovering is that the www website actually proxies requests through these resource URLs, and I'll show you that in a second. And that's the part where you got to start manually investigating things. But you go through and you use every one of these dialogues, you press every button, you toggle every switch, and if you miss one toggle switch or one button, you're potentially missing an entire set of payloads. Pinterest uses a very heavily server-side architecture, and it's not relying on JavaScript-heavy files full of URLs to drive the software. So you're not going to be able to scrape useful URLs out of JavaScript for Pinterest, okay? They're not there. All the stuff and things is server-side. So you have to actually use the software yourself in order to get it to make the URL calls for you to find the things you need. Or you've got to scrape them out of search engines, the Wayback Engine, whatever. That's not phase one. We're still on phase one here. So, again, do all these things. I'm not going to click everything. I can't redo 2 weeks worth of testing, while we're here. Now, here's an interesting example. There's a delete your data and account button, right? Now, if you wanted to test this, and you should, but you don't want to actually delete your account, this is where something like the burp intruder comes in. I mean, the interceptor. And let me show you this real quick. So, you come over here to the proxy intercept tab. Okay, so click proxy, and you turn the interceptor on. Now we come back over here and we say delete data, and as you can see, it caught the request, right? So we can start to see what the request would send to actually try to delete your account. This one looks pretty safe. When you see gibberish like this, that's all URL encoded and you need to be able to read it, you can copy it right here, come over to your decoder, paste it in the decoder, and hit decode as URL. Okay, it's one way to do it anyway. And you can just easily see a little better what's going on. This request has nothing to do with actually deleting the account. So we can forward that on. That's safe, that's safe, that's safe. That's a log resource. It's just creating log files. That's safe. That's safe. Stat logs. That's safe. You forward through the things that don't look like they're going to hurt your account, right? And what we have here, full hash is fine. That's a Google API. Stat log. When you're doing interceptors, actually, none of those did anything dangerous. What you want to do, if you only want to intercept the stuff in scope, is you need to come down here and say, on the options tab of the proxy, click this box that says target is in scope, and it won't intercept trash requests from third-party domains and fill up your interceptor with stuff you don't want to see. So now we're to the actual delete screen, okay, and it's asking me if we want to continue. So we turn our interceptor off because it keeps loading crap in the background, and now it's back on. We're going to hit continue. We're saying other, send email. So to delete the account, it apparently sends a verification email, so it's safe, and that's a good thing. So this is the actual post that makes the request to send the email right here, right? We've got a post of delete account resource update, and you would look in this and you would see if it looks like it's susceptible to an IDOR. You can see that it actually does take a user ID in the request. So you may be able to send it to somebody else's ID and get it to trigger an account deletion email. But they did think this through pretty well, right? And you're not going to be able to just delete somebody's account. They're going to have to click on a verification email to do it. So what you could potentially do is, see, we've still intercepted and not done anything with this. You could right-click this and say send a repeater. The repeater is my baby, right? So now I've got this little request over there saved for later that I can look at, and I can go ahead and tell it to drop this request because I don't actually want to generate maybe account deletion email, and I just turn the interceptor back off. And we come back over here and it's like nothing ever happened now, okay? So that's just kind of an example of how you can use the interceptor to make things do what you want. So now we can test this URL right here. Now this is my user ID. So this is where Notepad++ comes in, right? So what we know is we made an account. So account Z+1. I'm showing you, this is very important for organization if you're going to be on a target for a while, right? This was our first account email. User ID, if I can type correctly. So now we've got data from one account we're starting to populate in here, okay? And then we'll have another account for Z+2 at z-w.ink, and it will have its own user ID. And as we test, we start populating, different, there's going to be an add account ID, and then we're going to have like private PIN ID, public PIN ID. These are all IDs you want to test. Private board ID. Just trying to think of some of the things I saw out there, right? The advertiser ID and the user IDs are the ones that you see a lot of. There are other IDs out there, but the point is you want to basically have this whole organized list of IDs, and it helps you swap back and forth. When you're trying to test broken access control issues. So you start sort of populating these values as you're going through. Now, I don't have another valid user ID yet, right? And I don't want to trigger an email, deletion for another user ID. So what we do, and I need to, show you this kind of stuff so that you've seen it, is we go try to find now my other browser window that has Pinterest. And let's now come into the settings here and open this, and what we want to do is effectively just get the ID for this user, which should come back in one of these requests. Let's just grab this ID, response. With every one of these objects, there's a client context that comes back, which I know from testing this program too much, and in the client context is the user ID of the user somewhere. That's not unauth ID. User object, we're getting there. All right, there's my ID from my other account. Okay, so, because that's right, I set the other one to female and this one says male, so there you go. See, it's good to keep them opposite, right? So now we've got two IDs to test against. So now what I can do for this delete request over here, these are the cookies for account 1. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna change the object ID here for account 1 to the object ID of account 2. And I'm doing it in between the %22 signs. You just get used to seeing this crap after a while, right? And go ahead and post this request. And that was successful. Shoot. Okay, so now I'm gonna go check my mailbox and see if I just got a deletion request to Z+2. I did not. The deletion request came into my mailbox for Z+1. So apparently it doesn't use the object. I thought that might have been a vulnerability while I was making the video. That's pretty funny. I actually never tested this particular URL, which goes to show there's still stuff out there, right? So I don't think it uses the ID at all. I'm going to type 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in here now and send it over again. Yeah, and we get the exact same response back. But see, you couldn't do that safely without having a number to know that first. And I'm looking for a second email to come across the pipe now. Yep. So I just got a second email for Z+1 that says account to be deleted. So we don't have an IDOR here. It's actually just completely ignoring the user ID field in the payload. But this is the methodology you use to test things manually, right? I mean, an automated bot or authorized add-on or whatever is going to have trouble doing this unless you've gone through and manually already told it, to insert things into these particular spots. And honestly, you're not going to have known that unless you were testing manually anyway. I'm on water today. I know it's boring. Okay, so man, we're already 20 minutes deep in this. We've barely scratched the surface. All right, so again, first thing you do, you test all the things, you push all the buttons in the software, right? And the next step, I didn't find anything, and let me pull up my submissions here. I didn't find anything particularly useful on any of this main account area stuff. But what I did notice, as we come over and we actually start looking at the traffic, and now we're organizing, we're sorting by time descending. Always sort by time descending. Why? Because it helps your brain. And let's make it a little smaller, man. Make it smaller. And let's go ahead and come down here to all the payloads let's actually say show only requested items for the moment because we're not exploring. One thing that got real annoying, and this is something useful, these post to context log and stat log resource create are just log generation endpoints. You can right click on this and say exclude from scope, somewhere. Why don't I see that? Maybe you have to do it over here. I don't know. Oop, I got ADD. Anyway, you want to probably exclude these from scope, assuming you can find, oh, there it is, remove from scope. Man, that was way harder than it needed to be, removed from scope. And now those two URLs are removed from the scope, and we won't see those things filling up our screen any further. Once you've tested them and you're sure they're just harmless logging endpoints, we don't want to keep collecting that for the rest of eternity, so I turned those off. One of the things I first noticed was there was a GraphQL endpoint, okay? And that they used various GraphQL queries to return user data, right? So the first thing I did was I sent that over to the repeater, and you know, there's sometimes variables that can be declared in GraphQL. So this particular query didn't use one, but there were others that did, and when I first started testing, GraphQL introspection was enabled. So I sent an introspection payload right here. I did a video on introspection, so look for it if you don't know what it is. And I sent a full introspection payload right here, and the entire GraphQL schema came back for this subdomain and like 9 others. Now, I never reported that, but I think I may have made a video showing it, and I think somebody else reported it, so they fixed it now. So GraphQL is no longer enabled, but it was, and I spent the first couple of days actually in my part-time spare time going through every one of their GraphQL queries because introspection was enabled, and testing those for insecure direct object references, and also adding additional fields in the queries to try to get user data back that isn't supposed to come back. So like if we look at this request handler, v3 get current user handler right here, and it says on user. Well, right now I can add a field right here that says location and send that over, and it will actually bring the location data of the user back if it's there, okay? And once you know the schema, you can actually start trying to get it to bring stuff back that it may not, supposed to bring back. So I have logged a bunch of bugs related to GraphQL. They didn't care about a lot of them, especially the location related stuff. But I did end up finding some endpoints that would bring back a PII for businesses, and so that has since been resolved, and that was probably one of the better finds on GraphQL. So again, that was all I did. Was I saw there was a GraphQL endpoint, I sent an introspection query to it. I don't know why it was enabled in production on a target this big, but it was. I then took that full schema and I loaded it into a playground, a GraphQL playground, which again, I made a video on this. Go check it out. I think it's on the introspection video. I show how you load that into a playground, and then you can easily test in the GraphQL playground because it makes the schema nice and pretty. So that was sort of phase one, was I went through GraphQL IDOR testing, and I didn't spend as much time on that as I did the APIs. After I finished up GraphQL and realized that it's actually pretty locked down, they had a very solid GraphQL schema. It's done a lot better than a lot of them I have tested. I moved on to looking at more stuff in the web app. So this is literally what happened. I didn't do anything else. I tested the website, what you just saw me do. I tested all the authenticated areas. I pushed all the pins and buttons and things like that. And once I had looked at all of this, and it's worth noting, let me see if I can sort these real quick. Okay, I did notice that these API resource URLs make some interesting calls. Okay, so the API resource is like a proxy that makes calls to the API. So I'm going to take this data right here and show you in the decoder that this is actually making a call to v3/users/me. And I later found out that's corresponding to api.pinterest.com/v3/users/me. So the website itself is in fact utilizing api.pinterest.com, but it's doing it through a web proxy, okay? And you can actually see the URLs that these things are requesting down at the bottom of each request, and stuff and things, all right? So what I'm gonna do now is kind of show you the next phase. I didn't find anything at this point, I don't believe. I was just trying to get a sense of sort of the idea of how the website worked. Now, where it got interesting was when I came over to here and I converted it to a business account. So the basic user accounts, they can create pins, that's about it, right? You create pins, you surf pins, you can send messages to people. But the business, when you convert it to a business, that's when it really gets real. So I took both accounts and I converted both accounts to a business account. And that's when you get assigned an advertiser ID, okay? We're gonna call this Z Business 1. I don't have a website, just to keep it easy. You obviously wanna actually enter things into all the boxes when you're testing, but I'm just trying to get through this dialogue real quick. I'm just clicking all the things, I'm not sure. Okay, so now we officially have a business account. So we've been converted to a business account. And now you have all these menu items you can test because you took the time to actually click convert to business. And I would do the same thing with the second account so that now we have a set of advertiser IDs and business IDs. And this is when I started going through and testing every one of these features in the web GUI and looking at all the calls that are made in the background there. So let's just click billing as an example here. And you can see we were taken over to ads.pinterest.com now. Accept. Okay, I accepted the agreement. I don't know what it is, but I accepted it. I don't know why it didn't actually. There we go. So here, we're on a billing information page. We want to just give it some random address, 100 Place Street. Let's make it Myrtle Beach. We love Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, don't we? I don't know what the zip of that place is. We'll just give it some random numbers. Is there validation? Nope. It takes anything. So. Great, that made some request again, proxied over, it looks like, to, up here, the URL user's me, and then we get a request over here to the billing. We come way down. Now we're actually getting calls to api.pinterest.com. Okay, so I used all the features that were in, the business area. Now the question you have to ask yourself, how many of you would enter a credit card number right here? All right, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say, close to 0% of you. And there's test credit card numbers out there like 4111111111111, and that's a valid Visa card number, believe it or not. And you can actually do like 425, 4111. Okay, whatever. Just so long as it's a date in the future and it's a valid 4-digit CVV. Now, this will allow you to defeat the client side stuff. Well, if you can get maybe it's just 3 digits for Visa. Yeah, and it'll let you make a post. So let's go ahead and save that. It wants me to have a actual address up here. So I like to use Bob Saget for no good reason. Z+1 at Z-W.INK. Address, Place Street, Place. North Nebraska, that's good, 29222, don't care. All right, let's try that again, save. All right, so it looks like it's gonna make a post request for us now. Yep, it's doing stuff and things. All right, so it couldn't verify the payment information, that's great. So it made some calls to various, URLs at this point. Now, you may be of the mind that this was sufficiently tested at this point, but I'm here to tell you that unless you enter a real credit card number, you're going to miss out on payloads. And one of the P1s I found was associated with this particular area, without going into any more details. And apparently, you people do not test entering real credit card numbers into dialogues. And I mean, honestly, if everybody else does that uses the product, I don't know what you see the risk as, right? You need to get yourself a business credit card ID or something with a low limit that you're not worried about. Heck, you could get one of those disposable Visa cards that have a $10 balance on it, like you get at Walmart or some random store. Have a valid Visa card that you can enter to test into websites, because you're going to miss out on valuable payloads. It was obvious that this was not tested. So that was the next thing I did, was I went through and I tested all of these different things, and then I came over to the APIs and I started looking at the calls that were made, right? Now, that was one of the P1s. Then, once I used everything in the dialogues and I wasn't finding any more from actually clicking on all the web GUI buttons and looking at these requests back here, I started actually trying to enumerate the API to find more stuff, but let's not go that far yet. To be clear, for IDOR testing, okay, this is super simple. You see requests right here on the page that have numbers in them. These are like my favorite thing in the world. When you see requests that have numbers in them, this is my advertiser ID. Now, get to to an advertiser ID is a pretty safe thing, right? So you could send this over to the repeater, and you could simply change this number to a 4 from a 5 and hit send. You decreased it, and we were able to, for some reason, get somebody else's freaking data back while I'm making a video naturally. Let me see if these payloads change in size when I do this. Really? It shouldn't be doing that. That should not be working. Crap. What happens if I hit the number 1 in here? Okay, good. Whew, I was worried I found it. Okay, I did test this, I remember now. This one's a red herring. I was like, there's no way I missed this. The advertiser equals parameter is the one that's actually used for the ID here. The one in the path's not actually used. So I was like, wow, how did I miss that? So you would change the ID right here, and then it would tell you that my user ID is not authorized to get that information on that other user ID, okay? Whew, freaked out for a second there. I thought I was gonna have to stop the video. Good deal, we're still in the green. So, you know, you go through and you test every one of these manually and make sure that you're not finding IDORs in them, you know, like the billing profile right here. You test it on absolutely anything you can. And just see if somebody else's stuff comes back, right? Nope, nothing came back there. Good to go. Now, that's sort of the idea for IDR testing manually. You make requests, you see requests, then you check them. Now, if we turn off show only requested items over here, I want to see if we have anything interesting yet. No. Now, the next thing I did was I was like, okay, they obviously have a bunch of APIs here and a bunch of different paths and things, but how do I know what they are, right? Because only a couple of them were used compared to the number I ended up finding. What I did, I don't like to do a lot of fuzzing, but fuzzing, you know, essentially is just throwing large quantities of words or characters at an endpoint, and that's essentially what we're going to do here. Is we're just going to take a base request like this, just a slash, and send it over to the intruder, okay? And what we want to do is just type test right here, highlight test, and then we want to send it a file that has a lot of known URL indicators or things that might be interesting. What you want to do if you don't have one of these, I don't really like sharing all the stuff that I spent time putting together. I'm kind, but not quite that kind. Go out and put in some work and go to github.com and look for a list where people have you know, created endpoint files for things like the Open API spec or just useful endpoints for testing. These things are out there on GitHub. Other people have put together. Okay, I like to keep some stuff to myself. But this important files thing right here isn't anything super special. I think I actually got it off GitHub and added a couple things to it. But we're going to run through this real quick, and we're going to do 100 requests a second. Not a second, simultaneously, even though it comes out to about 100 a second. Go ahead and hit start. And what I do is I sort the request. It's almost done already. I sort the request like this so that you can see the request coming in live, because if you get a 429 or something, it means you've been rate limited and blocked. It's done already, so we're going to start it, you know, sorting it by 200. This is what was interesting. This is exactly what I did. Was I saw that there was a docs endpoint that returns a 308 response code that redirects to /docs, and this was how I found the API schema initially. Okay. Wasn't real hard, as you can see. So if we come over to back to the browser now, and I think we're in the second account. Let's go back over to the first one. Doesn't really matter. And we type in api.pinterest.com/docs. Make sure you are logged in. So we don't have access to it. And this was sort of the first thing that made me scratch my head. Now let me come back over here to the repeater, the intruder. I'm losing my mind, man. I've got too many. I like multiple windows. I'm currently working in one window. It's kicking me out. Let's send this to the repeater now, and go ahead and send that. Follow redirection. It's saying I'm not logged in. Well, so we thought we didn't have access to the API docs endpoint through a happy accident. And you know, as Bob Ross says, there are no accidents, right? Got to make a big decision. Bob Ross was a painter back in like the 70s or 80s, and he would have this beautiful painting canvas, and then he wanted to put in a tree, and he'll be like, it's time to make a big decision. And he would just slap this tree down in the middle of what was an otherwise perfect landscape, you know, because you're covering up this beautiful landscape with this sloppy looking tree, and there's only happy accidents if you screw up, he said. So anyway, you can have happy accidents in hacking too, and as I started enumerating the subdomains, which was the next phase, just to see what was out there, looking at the main stuff off the website, right? Like there's a, I'm gonna close this down so we can get down to the bottom here. We need to go back to the main page. There's a link to the developer site off the main page, right? Remember I said click everything, and through part of clicking everything, I had discovered there was a developers.pinterest.com. I'm getting in my words quota for the week. Crap, I don't know how to make a display now that I converted it to a business account. But anyway, there should be a footer at some point, somewhere, that lets you click things. Screw it. You will find developers.pinterest.com off the main page. And what that lets you do is kind of start looking at some documentation for like the Pinterest API v5 and stuff like that. I may have found this on the search engine, but it's off the main website. There's nothing secret here. This is open to everybody. And through doing this, I realized there was a My Apps button, okay, after I had converted to a business. So you can actually say, see terms, accept this really long thing I didn't read, and you can connect your first app. Well, what I realized was that it gives you access to the API Docs website. So when I connected an app, I just created some generic business sounding thing or whatever, and then it goes in for approval. It took like 24 hours and they approved it. When I logged back into my account, the next time I was testing, I had access to the Docs, the API Docs endpoint, and that made it really easy to access and look at schemas. Now I'm going to log in real quick to a different account so I can show you that. Log out. Okay, so yeah, I just logged in with my other account, and now we're going to go back and do the same exercise, right? We're going to go to api.pinterest.com/docs. And now that I'm logged in as a developer, I noticed that you start to have a little bit of access, and that gave me access to this thing called the API Explorer over here. And it turns out that the API Explorer is sort of a SSRF proxy type deal that will actually request like v3/users/me, for instance, and it will actually proxy requests to pull back, the authenticated user that's currently signed in. So what I did was I started running every URL I had available to me through this API Explorer, which actually resulted in some SSRF/privilege escalation issues on a variety of the endpoints. Now, there's an API reference, but no actual reference file, which was kind of annoying. It's like there should be something here, but there's not. And I can't exactly recall how I first found it, but you can see there's like references to Docs authentication and Docs response codes and things like that. So I believe I started enumerating these unrequested items to see what comes up, and eventually found some API specs. Well, okay, the next thing that happened was Pinterest sent me a private invite to a different version of a program they have, and that one has a slightly different level of access. And when I logged into that and visited this Docs website, it had a plethora of API references that were going down the page right here. And that was where I really started finding APIs to test. So, happy accidents, as it were, after I logged that first P1, that built a trust relationship with Pinterest, right? And then I was able to find more stuff and explore more stuff and build on that. So, you can find APIs by looking for documentation and Swagger endpoints and OpenAPI spec endpoints, at the URLs. You could fuzz any of these things until the cows come home, right? Like if you know the root path, you could just start sending different words right here after the numbers and see if you get different URLs and things back. And I did do that on a couple of them and find some interesting things that were not in the API spec. But I also, found some APIs that returned more API specs, which was really weird. So I really just went deep on these APIs and started trying to test absolutely every type of broken access control and every method I could. There were gets, posts, puts, deletes, maybe a handful of patches, requests, and that was really the process. So, my production version of the Pinterest Burp Suite file probably has like 10,000 requests in this api.pinterest subdomain. And I never tested anything really off of Pinterest.com and api.pinterest.com. There's probably a lot still out there, but they evidently do the vast majority of their, their calls in sort of a small surface area, which I think is good from an infrastructure protection standpoint. You don't have 300 different servers, each with a different subdomain name for each function, because each one of those is potentially its own risk. the Kubernetes designs and stuff that people are doing nowadays, which are a mess. And I mean, really, that was it, guys. So it started off by just manually testing all the buttons, having 2 different accounts to test with, and as I found more APIs, I tested those and I pivoted and I tested those and I pivoted. And when you see all these different requests, you just test them out in the browser. So I largely use the browser, intruder, and repeater. Burt JavaScript Link Finder was running the entire time and found almost nothing useful at all, which is really strange for a target of this size. So they do a really good job at not keeping sensitive URLs or really URLs at all in JavaScript files. Like I said, it's a very server-side heavy architecture, and the things you want to look for on a target like this are like how to get other people's PII back, right? Addresses, names, phone numbers, emails, financial information, reports, and you want to be able to change other people's stuff for vulnerabilities too, which means you're testing your second account, right, that you created. So you want to see if you would be able to change somebody's campaign or ads or information, or potentially cause a denial of service by putting gibberish in a place that the code's not expecting it, things like that. And that's really all there was to it. So I don't want y'all to think it's magic. I do want you to understand, though, that it's manual. Not so much magic, but a good bit manual. Because if I hadn't have put my brain to work while I was looking at these things, like when you look at this, you say, okay, it's an API Explorer. What does it do? Well, you need to be looking at this and say, well, let's make this request again, right? I didn't actually make a request in the browser to v3user/me. I made it to Docs API Explorer. And what that means is Docs API Explorer is actually the URL making the request to the API. And if that's the URL making the request, well, that means API.pinterest.com's own server is making a request to API.pinterest.com, and that may defeat certain types of mitigations if you're thinking outside the box, right? For various types of vulnerabilities like CSRF, cross-site request forgery, server-side request forgery. You might be able to access URIs that are otherwise not accessible because this obviously has some level of permission. When you dig more into it, you realize this consumer ID is not actually even my consumer ID, which made things really interesting. If you look under API Explorer, there's a Pinterest.com. Now if I hit go, and we get the exact same response size back almost. Let's do it again. Yeah, so you get slightly different responses back, and it's interesting because this user ID is my consumer ID for my test app, my developer app that I made, which gave me access to the docs, but is also a default one that runs that has a higher level of permissions. So I tested this pretty extensively, and I may not have found everything. So I'm not saying y'all shouldn't pick it up where I left off necessarily, right? I mean, you might be able to do some interesting magic here, and if you do, feel free to add me as a collaborator for 1%. Just for fun. Love to have my name attached to it. But yeah, this is an interesting endpoint that they don't appear to want to take down. I think they use it a lot. So if you find something interesting you can do with it, log it, right? I'm sure I missed something. I think that's about all I have to say on this. So again, it's fun to go deep on programs. I didn't touch any other programs or look at anything else while I was working on this for a couple of weeks, and it really helps your mind get into Pinterest, right? Like I was fully engaged in the Pinterest product. I knew what all the different IDs were and what they did. I had people messaging me on Twitter and Slack and various other places and saying they got duplicates, and I'm like, sorry, that was me, sorry, that was me, sorry, that was me. I mean, I have the bugs kind of memorized once I log them. They're like my little bug babies, and apologies that y'all found those after me, but that's great because it means that you're learning how to do what I'm doing, which means I'm communicating effectively and y'all are learning effectively, and that means when you go on the next target, you're going to be the first person to the bug, not me, and that means everybody's winning, right? So that's really cool. So I appreciate y'all watching the video and learning and going out and helping make the world a safer place. And let me know if you have any questions. I know I don't respond to everybody on Twitter private messages, and I apologize for that, but if you just send me a message that says "sup bro," I'm not going to respond to it. And if you just send me a message that asks a question that I've answered in videos like 10 times, I'm probably not going to respond to that either. I just get a lot of messages, so those of you that ask an actual coherent question that's something I can respond to that I haven't already addressed in a bunch of videos, I usually respond to. Thanks for tuning in, everybody, and I don't know what target I'm going to go on next, but I'll keep trying to make videos, and if there's anything in particular y'all want to see a video on that it's something I know how to do, I'll try to make a video for you on it. But I would like to emphasize, definitely rely on manual testing, not automation, especially when you're going after mature targets like Pinterest, right? Because they've been scanned. They've been scanned a lot, like a whole lot. And you're going to have to apply your brain to find bugs, at that point. So all these things, you see unrequested items, request them, test them, look at them, think about them. Go look deeper on search engines and see if they found something you didn't. Try to find, GitHub code references. I mean, the list goes on, right? But I posted to Twitter a couple of days ago sort of my methodology for going through all this, and that's exactly what I did. I clicked everything, I used everything, and this video got really long. We're at 45 minutes. I can't go into a bunch of details about the specific bugs I found, but suffice to say, they were almost all IDORs or ID substitution issues, if you want to call them that, and they ranged from, in my opinion, rather catastrophic to sort of menial. So there were a wide range of interesting things you could do, and BugCrowd actually triaged 5 of them as P1s for me, and then Pinterest knocked 3 of them down from P1s, which was depressing. They were teetering on a 3rd one, and I may have 1 P1 still out there yet that I don't know about. But suffice to say, Pinterest has been very fair with the triages, and when they don't keep something a P1, they justify why that is, like if they have other mitigations or it's not as catastrophic for some reason as we thought, and then they list why. Some of them we can't fully exploit because it's not safe. Like if I was a mean hacker in China on a rowboat sitting off the coast or something, trying to hack in, maybe I don't have strings attached and I go deeper and I know exactly what the risk is. But when you're a white hat hacker, you sort of have to, stop at a safety net location and say, well, I've proved that the broken access control exists and I can get to this and I can get to that, but I don't know exactly what the impact is beyond this point. And that's when you hand it off to Pinterest, and you have to just put a little trust in the program. I think, like I said, they're a great program to work for. So thanks for listening, everybody. This is probably the longest video I've ever made, but that's in general how I tested the Pinterest program. It was a little bit of luck and a little bit of skill and maybe a little bit of thinking like an evil crazy person. And you put all those things combined, you get a hacker, I guess. I don't know. Have a good one. Tune in for the next video. Thanks so much, everybody. Bye.